Canada needs a school of public policy because if you look at most of the challenges we face as a society, homelessness, access to quality health care, education, climate change, energy and the environment, a sustainable economy, the foundation for the solutions lies in the domain of public policy.
We don't have in Canada a deep tradition of interaction and of flow of personnel between government, business, and academia like exists in the United States and some other countries. So I think a school of public policy will be a good location from which to start that kind of an ethic.
If you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school. If you want to be an engineer, you go to engineering school. If you want to be a public servant, you should be able to have some training in public policy, and that's extremely beneficial.
There is an enormous benefit to a nation from having a school of public policy. It's basically a way of kind of linking the research community and some of the state-of-the-art findings on what could make policy better to the folks who really have frontline responsibility for choosing those policies and making policy decisions.
Government is really a servant of us, and it's critically important that we exercise our right to be involved in the public process, and that means that we have to have knowledge of how that process works.
The public service performs a very important function. They actually more or less set the policy in this country, and when I understood exactly what they did, I just realized how important they were and how important it is to have bright people there, to make certain there's a school they can go to learn about public policy. And I just think it's very important in this country, especially today.
Well, Western Canada is becoming a big player in Confederation. It wasn't always the case, but it is now an enormous contributor to the economy. You can't form a national government anymore without strong representation from the West, and Calgary is the capital of the New West. So it's very appropriate to have a major public policy center at the University of Calgary.
Calgary is a wonderful place for this public policy center to be based. It is the epicenter of the energy sources of our country, and I think it's well placed to make an important contribution in this area.
I think it's reflective of the spirit of Calgary that the University of Calgary would put forward a proposal to create a school of public policy. And I think in part it reflects that the West feels that there's many elements of Canadian public policy that could be done better. And in a way that is a role the University of Calgary has filled before and I think can fill very well here.
Well, as Premier, wanting to change the culture of New Brunswick, I started off by bringing in a number of outsiders to join the ranks of the public service. These would be people with business backgrounds. Some were very successful, but some failed. And part of the reason for their failure was that they didn't have either the education or the experience in the culture of the public service.
The old days that you could learn these skills on the job, I think are past. The better prepared you are when you get to those positions, the more useful you'll be to your employer.
If we don't have executives that are well stooped in public policy that can interact in a constructive way with public policy officials and academics as well, then we're going to have a harder time developing the best policies for this country.
There's too much of a chasm between government and the private sector in Canada, and there's a need for the private sector to understand how government operates, and there's a need for government to understand how the private sector operates. And the School of Public Policy can help build that bridge.
I think focusing on economic and social policies, as the school will, is going to position the graduates and the Canadian policymakers they'll advise to really participate to an even greater degree than they do already in the design of international policies to address common challenges and in the communication of new policy advice and policy findings to policymakers, not just in Ottawa, in provincial capitals, but to global policymakers in a way that may have some very, very real benefits for the globe.
I think we are still facing a long-run challenge in terms of affordable and widely available energy sources. Obviously, this is something the world is seized with. In particular, we're seized with it here in the North American continent, where we are a major supplier of energy to the world's largest energy consumer. And of course, we're both confronted with the global challenges of climate change. So this is going to be a particularly important emphasis, and one which, once again, the University of Calgary is well positioned to take advantage of.
We have to get international relations right. We have to understand where we fit into the world. We have to have good, strong trade relationships. We have to have people to manage the institutional relationships. We have to have people who understand the international world. We have to have people who understand even our biggest trading partner. The public service of the United States and Canada are dramatically different. We need people who understand the differences. You need a school of public policy with a focus on these subject areas if you're going to produce the skill sets necessary to manage these complex relationships.
We are increasingly reminded of how interlinked global economies are and how policies chosen in one country can immediately have consequences, not just domestically, but abroad, that are really very important. So I think that public policy in general will become an even more global area in the future than it has been in the past. And I'm confident that the graduates of the school who've been trained to think about those policy issues are going to be on the forefront of those who can help to design global policies for the 21st century.
I know that the School of Public Policy will work closely with the business community, with the broader community, both here in Calgary, in Alberta, and across Canada, to get input and advice from a large cross-section of Canadians as to how public policy ought to be developed in this country.
For any school of public policy to be successful at the level that we want to be successful at, we are looking at financial support from the university, from governments, and from our community. The university has already put a serious amount of resources into the school and will continue to do so. We expect governments of all levels to contribute to the support of the school. And equally, we expect a community to support something that is so important to the future of Canada. So we are looking to our community for, over the next 5 years, somewhere in the order of just under $100 million worth of support to produce some of the policy work that this country desperately needs.